It was common to see 50 people in a room, maybe with one attendant.
3 or 4 kids at a table with one caregiver spooning food into children, 4 at a time.
And I was left in VM, and it was just terrible.
They don't do nothing. Can't go outside.
I think Jerry Provencel's legacy, again, is one that's spelled out by the number of lives that he's touched, either directly or indirectly.
It was a young Jerry Provencel's high school track coach, the iconic Bob Parks, who taught him the lesson that would mark a lifetime of experiences. It was the mantra that motivated an extraordinary career in human services. Run through the finish line. Jerry became a social worker for the simple reason of wanting to help a guy out. He began his career at a time when those with developmental disabilities were considered better off being sent away from their families and isolated in large institutions with staff trained to meet their needs. Jerry spent some of his early years working as an attendant at Kalamazoo State Hospital and a clinical social worker at Plymouth Center for Human Development. His experiences there soon convinced him of the injustice and indignity of the institutional model and spurred him to seek out alternatives.
I was beaten, sexually abused by the institution.
But they hit me, that stuff. I don't like it.
They had their own private cemetery, and the individuals who were buried there had case numbers on the grave markers, not names.
It was just a horrible time.
Jerry's daunting realizations about the quality of life in the institutions were reflected in his writings. With every day I worked, it became harder and harder for me to reconcile the dramatic differences between my life and all of its possibilities and the stunted daily routines my clients endured and the bleak futures that awaited them. I wasn't a social worker as much as I was a kind of gardener, planting and tending the seeds of hope in a gravel parking lot.
MORC was originally established by an act of the state legislature in 1972, designed to be a home for 650 people here in Clinton Township, and during its construction period, it became obvious to us that we had a mission to fulfill of providing services for people, and we started using small community settings as an alternative to the institution. Those smaller institutions proved so successful that when we built the facility itself, we limited the building. And again, Jerry Provencal, very influential in that decision to limit the size of the building to only 110 people, which is the maximum capacity that we ever had here. We quickly grew our community program, and it outstripped our capacity for the institution, and we closed the institution itself in 1989.
What do you make of those people who say, I have nothing against mentally retarded people, but not on my block?
We had the same kind of mentality that was expressed and upheld for a long time when in neighborhoods where Jews were disallowed and where blacks were disallowed. I don't know that we really have a right to that kind of choice.
Jerry Provencal was on the forefront of community living when the idea was just wishful thinking. He led a fight of fires and bullets to make it a promise.
In the last year and a half, there have been half a dozen firebombings of proposed group homes for the mentally retarded.
Despite opposition from lawsuits to violence, Jerry's unbending belief in the rights of people with disabilities to live freely in the community helped rally a civil rights movement.
This gentleman had said, I would be delighted to give my home to Macomb Oakland Regional Center. I got a call about 2 o'clock in the morning, and the house was on fire. The neighbors made it very clear they were not going to have the blankety-blank retards living with them.
With challenges coming on multiple fronts, Jerry took to television and Channel 7's Kelly and Company to defend the community model against uninformed skeptics.
The thought of a neighborhood unknowingly being guinea pigs to an experiment in placing aggressive individuals is is intolerable.
There were not experimental placements?
Absolutely not. The neighborhood that he's referring to in Novi, I will admit we've had problems with. We've had problems in that neighborhood. We've had problems with 2 families in particular who have not liked the home. He does not point out, however, that most of the neighbors in that immediate vicinity have been accepting. As a matter of fact, when one neighbor complains, other neighbors are coming across the street with cakes and encouragement. It's very, very unfair, terribly unfair, almost obscene to suggest it because you have a problem in a specific home that it indicts the program.
Parents really got together and they were very strong. And they were heard because they spoke up and they didn't stop until they finally were able to get the kind of services that they needed for their son or daughter.
Despite the many obstacles, Jerry's passion never wavered. Through his writings, he expressed his relentless determination to run through. We have to convince that the work is more exhilarating than exhausting, more exciting than exasperating, more dramatic than depressing. We are in the business of changing society's collective mind about the way it sees and treats a slice of its people. We are in the liberation business. It should not be a hard sell. Jerry served as an expert witness in 14 class action lawsuits, including virtually every major institutional litigation case in the country, including the infamous Willowbrook case in New York. Incrementally, successes were realized and his views were ultimately confirmed in the courts. Having won the deinstitutionalization battle in the courts, MORC became a leader in community placement, developing innovative models from group homes to independent living to circles of supports to shared lives. These models gained worldwide acclaim under Jerry's leadership.
In Michigan, nobody lives in the institution anymore.
MORC was visited by the United Nations and gained recognition from 3 presidential administrations. Jerry initiated and promoted working relationships between MORC and 49 U.S. states and 54 countries. From Africa to Australia to South America to all of the United States, the achievements of MORC under Jerry's leadership served as a beacon to others around the world.
We were visiting an institution in Puerto Rico, and it was 4 or 5 stories high. And we were about to leave, and Jerry had stepped onto the elevator first, and he did not realize that one of the gentlemen that were living in the institution, he actually snuck behind him, and he had a suitcase in his hand as if to say, I'm going with this guy, I'm going to get out of here.
Due to Jerry's vision and the passionate advocacy of MORC, individuals with developmental disabilities have regained their civil rights and their basic dignity has been affirmed. Today, these individuals live freely in the community and are able to pursue opportunities and achieve successes that would have been previously unthinkable.
The program here, it helps me, like going bowling and churches and that.
I live in an apartment with one other fellow who I get along good with.
October 20th, we got married. Well, he's a nice person. I like him. He loves me. He imposed me to get married to him.
I have a son that is 53 years old and a daughter that's 45 years old that have an intellectual developmental disability. It wasn't easy, but eventually they both live in a supported independent home, of course with support staff, thanks to MORC. There are programs that they provide that assist them, and I'm very grateful for that.
The successes of individuals with developmental disabilities are just one part of Jerry Provensal's legacy. The lessons he provided to those he worked with continue to be enduring gifts to the mental health profession.
Jerry always had a sense of urgency, and he would like to talk about how time moves at the same rate for those with disabilities as it does for those of us without the disability. And it means that just because you're living in an institution doesn't mean you have another day to waste. And I think that lesson is often lost in a large bureaucratic system.
Jerry has so many things that he will leave with most of us. And certainly that business of strength integrity, the ability to make other people see and share his vision is, I think, what will always be there.
Without Jerry, there would not have been the sense of urgency, the long-term commitment, and the rights movement for individuals who have developmental disabilities who don't have the opportunity to speak for themselves.
How do I feel about Jerry? I love Jerry. He was the ultimate guy that changed things. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, Jerry.
He really made it all happen, and we are so grateful to him. And we just want the opportunity to tell him, both my husband and I, thank you very much for everything you have done. It was magic.
It's no exaggeration to think that any place in the world right now that has had a successful community placement program can trace its genesis back to Jerry Provencal, which is very remarkable, you know, that a man from a small town in Michigan can have that kind of impact on people.
In the race to liberation, Jerry Provencal held fast to the belief that no man is free until all men are free. His reverberating themes of ownership, relentless action, and urgency have moved the minds and hearts of people to act in ways that forever changed the course of history for people with developmental disabilities. Our society will be eternally in his debt for his efforts in leading us to expect and demand desirable lifestyles for all of our citizens. Even as the finish line of his career nears, there is no doubt that Jerry will be forever running through it.